That night felt like any other night for the mechanic who worked in an old workshop on the edge of a quiet desert town. His days were usually spent fixing broken engines, patching rusty fuel tanks, or repairing old farm trucks that barely held themselves together. He never thought his life would change. Nothing exciting ever happened in that lonely workshop, and deep inside, he believed it never would. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, and he was used to people ignoring him when they passed by. But he didn't mind. Fixing machines was the only part of life that made sense to him. Machines didn't lie, they didn't judge, and they didn't disappear. They just broke, and he fixed them. Simple. But that night, something strange cut through the calm air of the desert. It began with a low, vibrating sound, the kind that made the windows tremble softly and made the ground feel alive. At first, he thought it was just another heavy truck passing by on the highway. But then the sound grew louder, deeper, and the lights in the workshop flickered for a moment. He stepped outside, wiping his hands on a cloth, and looked toward the open desert. What he saw made him freeze. A bright streak of light tore across the night sky, burning white and blue like a small star falling out of heaven. But it wasn't falling straight down. It zigzagged in a strange way, like something was trying desperately to stay in the air but failing. Sparks exploded behind it, and then a deep roar echoed through the open land. The mechanic had seen shooting stars before, but this was different. This was too close, too controlled, too alive. The falling object vanished behind the hills, and a few seconds later, the ground shook again, a muffled thud that rolled through the sand like distant thunder. He stood there in silence, feeling his heart pound. Anyone else would have turned around, locked the doors, and gone inside. But something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the strange feeling that something out there needed help. He grabbed his tool bag, jumped in his old truck, and drove toward the hills without a second thought. The road was rough and empty. No one else had seen the falling light, at least not from his side of town. As he got closer to the hills, he saw a faint glow in the distant soft, flickering, and completely unnatural. He parked the truck and continued on foot, stepping carefully over rocks and dry shrubs. The air smelled like metal and heat. Then he saw it. A massive object lay half buried in the sand, its surface scorched and cracked. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a drone. It was something he had never seen in his entire life. The shape was smooth and curved, like a giant silver shell with glowing lines running across it. Broken pieces lay scattered around, still warm and humming softly with strange energy. He stepped closer, heart beating in his ears, trying to convince himself this was real. Then he heard a sound. A weak voice, soft, struggling, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. He stopped, listening carefully. The voice came again, clearer this time, and he realized it wasn't just a voice. It was someone calling for help. He moved toward the other side of the broken craft, and that's when he saw her. A figure sat against the damaged hull, her arm pressed to her side as if trying to stop the pain. She wasn't like anyone he had ever seen. Her skin had a faint glow under the moonlight. Her hair shimmered with a strange metallic tint, and her eyes, large, bright, and full of fear, looked straight at him the moment he stepped into view. For a second, he froze. She did too. Both of them stared at each other, trying to understand what they were seeing. She looked frightened, exhausted, and barely able to stay conscious. He could see the way her chest rose and fell, each breath shaky and shallow. He held up his hand slowly, trying not to scare her. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, though his voice trembled from shock. She blinked as if processing his words. Her voice was weak, almost fading. "Please help." Those two words were enough. He rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. Up close, The damage was worse than he thought. Her suit was torn, and parts of it sparked faintly. She was injured, and the cold desert night wasn't helping. He didn't know what she was, or where she came from. But he understood one thing clearly: she needed help. And she needed it fast. "Okay," he whispered, steadying himself. "I'll get you out of here." He carefully lifted her arm over his shoulder, and she winced in pain but didn't resist. She weighed less than he expected, as if her bones were lighter than a human's. Slowly, step by step, he guided her toward the truck. Every movement made her breathe sharply, and he felt a strong protective instinct rise inside him. He had helped people before, but never someone like this. Never someone who looked so lost yet strong at the same time. When they reached the truck, he opened the passenger door and helped her inside. She leaned back against the seat, her eyes closing for a moment. He turned on the heater so the cold wouldn't weaken her further. Her breathing steadied slightly, though her face still showed pain. He glanced at her, wondering if she could understand him. "Your ship," he said slowly, pointing back toward the crash site. "Is it dangerous? Will anyone come looking for it?" She opened her eyes again, and for a second he saw something like fear mixed with urgency. "No one good?" she whispered. "We must leave." Now, that was enough. He started the truck, turned it around, and drove away quickly, aiming for the hidden back roads that no one ever used. As they moved farther from the crash site, she watched him quietly. Even though she was injured, her eyes still carried a sense of dignity and strength. It was clear she wasn't just anyone. Whoever she was, she carried some kind of importance. Finally, after a long silence, she spoke again, her voice soft but clearer than before. "You helped me, even though you didn't know me." He didn't look her in the eyes. He kept his focus on the road, but his voice was gentle. "Someone needed help. That's enough for me." She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to understand the kind of person he was. "In my world, no one helps without expecting something." He shook his head. "Well, this isn't your world." The truck rattled over a bump, and she winced again. Instantly, he slowed down, making the ride smoother. It wasn't just kindness. It was something deeper, something he couldn't explain. Seeing her suffer made something twist inside him, something that pushed him to protect her without thinking. By the time they reached his workshop, she was barely awake. He opened the door, lifted her carefully in his arms, and carried her inside. She didn't protest. She didn't fear him. Maybe she sensed that he meant no harm. Maybe she was simply too weak. Or maybe, deep down, she saw that he was the only one she could trust right now. He placed her gently on a small cot he kept in a corner for late nights. She watched him as he covered her with a blanket, her eyes filled with gratitude as well as confusion, like she couldn't understand why someone would go this far for a stranger. He sat on a stool beside her, breathing slowly, trying to figure out what he had just gotten himself into. He had found a ship from the stars, saved someone who wasn't human, and brought her into his world. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. He didn't know what danger followed her. But he knew one thing for sure. His quiet, simple life would never be the same again. The workshop was quiet in the early morning, but the mechanic barely slept that night. He kept checking on the strange visitor resting on the cot, unsure if she would wake up or if her condition would get worse. He had wrapped her wounds as carefully as he could, though her skin wasn't like human skin. It healed differently, slowly glowing at the edges, as if the body itself tried to repair what human hands couldn't fully understand. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, she opened her eyes. Her gaze went straight to him. He had been sitting beside her for hours, tools still in his lap, as if watching over her was just another part of his job. She looked confused at first. Not scared, Not angry, just unsure of where she was. Her voice came out soft, barely above a whisper. "Is this your shelter?" He nodded. "It's just my workshop. Not much, but it keeps out the cold." She looked around slowly, studying the stacks of old equipment, metal shelves, and half-finished engines. It was a world far different from whatever place she came from. Yet she didn't seem scared of it, only curious. "You stayed here all night," she said, noticing the tired look in his eyes. He shrugged lightly. "I didn't want you waking up alone." She stared at him for a moment, as if weighing his intentions. Most people, at least from her world, would never help a stranger without getting something in return. And yet, here he was, treating her like someone who mattered. Her breathing was still weak, but she slowly sat up. He moved quickly, steadying her before she could fall. She winced, gripping his arm, and he let her rest until the pain eased. "You were hurt pretty badly," he said quietly. "Your ship took a hard hit." Her eyes lowered. The memory of the crash seemed painful, not just physically but emotionally. "They attacked us. I tried to escape, but they followed. I pushed the ship too far." He could hear the guilt in her voice, the weight of something heavy she carried alone. "Well, you're safe now," he said. She looked at him with an expression that seemed almost surprised. "Safe because of you." He didn't respond to that. He turned away, pretending to adjust the tools on his table, even though they didn't need adjusting. He wasn't used to praise, especially not from someone like her, someone who looked like she belonged in a world far more advanced than his. A few minutes later, she tried to stand. He hurried to her side again, letting her lean on his arm as she took a slow, shaky step. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To see the damage," she replied. "If the ship can be repaired, I must return home." He could tell she wasn't strong enough to walk that far, but she insisted. He grabbed a thick coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She didn't question it, she just pulled it tighter, as if surprised by how comforting something so simple could feel. They stepped outside, and the cold desert air hit them instantly. The ground still carried faint marks from the ship's crash, though most people wouldn't notice unless they knew where to look. His workshop was hidden behind old storage buildings. Giving her temporary safety, they reached the back door where he kept his truck. When she saw it, she paused, puzzled, as if trying to figure out what the machine was. "You drive this?" she asked. He smiled a little. "It's not pretty, but it gets the job done." In her world, machines were probably sleek, silent, and controlled by advanced systems. His old truck, rumbling and rusty, must have felt like ancient technology to her. But she didn't judge. She simply climbed in slowly, resting against the seat as if even sitting felt like an effort. He drove carefully toward the hills, avoiding the main paths. She watched the scenery rush by dry shrubs, cracked earth, distant rocks glowing in the morning light, as if every part of this world fascinated her. "Your world is quiet," she said suddenly. "Quiet?" he asked with a small laugh. "Most people call it boring." She shook her head gently. "No, not boring. Peaceful. There is space here to breathe." The simplicity of that statement surprised him. A stranger from across the stars admired the very things humans took for granted every day. When they reached the crash site, her expression tightened. The ship lay exactly where he had left it, broken, bent, half buried in the sand. Many parts still glowed with faint, dying energy. She stepped out of the truck with his help, breathing carefully as she approached the wreckage. Her fingers brushed the damaged hull, and a faint light responded to her touch. Almost like the ship recognized her. She whispered something in a language he didn't understand. It sounded soft and heavy, like it carried loss and hope all at once. "Can it be fixed?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. She walked around the craft, examining every broken panel, every burned circuit, every shattered piece. He followed her silently, watching her movements. Even injured, she carried herself with a kind of grace he couldn't explain. Finally, she turned to him. "It cannot fly, but it can be repaired." He blinked. "By who?" She looked directly into his eyes. "By you." He took a step back. "Me? I fix old trucks and tractors. I've never fixed anything like this." "You repaired machines alone all your life," she said softly. "Your hands understand what others overlook. I saw the way you lifted me. You were careful, gentle. Your mind is sharp, even if you do not see it." He didn't know how to respond. No one had ever spoken about him like that. People in town barely noticed him, unless they needed something. Yet here she was, someone from another world, telling him he was capable of the impossible. "Even if I try," he said, "I don't know your technology." "I will guide you," she replied, "but I cannot do it alone. I do not have the strength." He stared at the ship again. It was massive, complex, terrifying. One wrong move could make things worse. But when he looked at her, leaning weakly against the hull, trusting him with her life, he felt something shift inside him. "Okay," he finally said. "I'll help." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if a heavy weight lifted. She touched the ship again, and small panels opened, revealing compartments filled with strange glowing tools and devices. "These will answer to your touch if I give permission," she explained. He raised an eyebrow. "Permission? They can tell who's touching them?" She nodded. "They respond to intention. They know if someone means harm." He crossed his arms. "And you think I don't mean harm?" She looked at him with the softest expression he had seen on her face yet. "If you meant harm, I would not be standing here." The trust in her voice struck him deeper than he expected. She barely knew him, yet she placed her future in his hands. And in return, he felt a strange responsibility to protect her, not because he was forced to, but because he wanted to. Something about her presence changed the air around him. It made him feel needed. They spent the next few hours moving parts from the ship into the truck. Some pieces were too heavy, so he built makeshift ramps. She explained each component in simple terms: energy cores, shield relays, navigation nodes. Her knowledge surprised him. Even injured, she understood every part of the ship, like it was an extension of her own body. At one point, she nearly collapsed. He caught her quickly, her hands trembling as she tried to stay upright. "You need rest," he insisted. "I cannot rest. Time is against us." He tightened his grip gently so she wouldn't fall. "Nothing will happen in the next hour. You need your strength. Let's get back to the workshop." For a long moment, she resisted. But eventually, she nodded. "Thank you for caring." He helped her into the truck again, and she leaned back, closing her eyes with a tired sigh. He drove slower this time, not wanting to jolt her. She seemed more relaxed now, as if she didn't feel the need to stay alert every second. When they reached the workshop, he guided her inside. She sat on the cot again, watching him as he unloaded the strange parts. Her eyes followed every movement he made, as if memorizing him. "You saved me last night," she said quietly. "And now you help me again." He took a deep breath. Anyone would have done the same. "No," she replied calmly. "Not anyone." He couldn't argue with her. People in town were kind, but fearful. They would have called authorities or stayed away. He was the only one who ran toward the light in the sky as he started arranging the alien parts on his workbench. She watched him with a gentle expression that held gratitude, trust, and something deeper, something he couldn't name yet. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like just a mechanic fixing old engines. For the first time, he felt like he mattered. And this was only the beginning. The next few days moved in a strange rhythm inside the workshop. The mechanic spent long hours working on the alien ship parts, trying to understand each piece while the strange visitor guided him. Her voice was soft but clear, and even though she was weak, she explained everything patiently. She told him how the glowing cylinders carried energy, how the thin sheets weren't metal at all, but something that healed itself, and how the small crystal-like pieces acted like memory for the ship. He didn't understand everything at first. Some things made his head spin, and some things felt impossible. But she never laughed at him, never judged. She guided him step by step, and slowly, the strange technology began to feel less impossible. Sometimes he would catch her watching him quietly from the cot. She always looked thoughtful, as if trying to understand him as much as he tried to understand her ship. He pretended not to notice, but he felt her eyes on him, studying, trusting, maybe even waiting. But the peace inside the workshop didn't last long. It began with small things. Footsteps outside late at night. Shadows passing the windows. The sound of vehicles slowing down near the road, then speeding up again. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, maybe just people passing through. Maybe just his tired mind playing tricks. But the strange visitor felt it too. One evening, as he was tightening a connector on one of the glowing cores, she called out softly from the cot, "Do you hear that?" He paused. At first he heard only the hum of the tools and the soft desert wind outside. But then faintly he caught a sound. A slow crunch of gravel under shoes. Not one person. Several. Someone was outside. Maybe more than one. He turned off the tool and listened carefully. The visitor sat up slowly, her eyes sharp despite her weakness. Her glowing markings dimmed, as if she were instinctively preparing for danger. "They found us," she whispered. His stomach twisted. He didn't know who they were, but he didn't need details to know they were trouble. "Stay here," he said softly. "I'll take a look." She reached out, grabbing his wrist, not hard, but urgently. "Please, be careful." He nodded, gently freeing his hand, and moved toward the back window. He peeked through the gap in the dusty curtain. His workshop faced an empty road, and behind it stretched miles of open land. But now he saw two dark figures standing near the edge of the property. They didn't move like regular locals. They moved slowly, scanning the area, almost like they were searching for something specific. He stepped back from the window. "They're not from around here," he said quietly. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "They track energy. SIGNALS, anything unusual. My ship sent out a distress wave when it crashed. They must have followed it." He frowned. "Are they dangerous?" Her silence was the answer. He rubbed the back of his neck, thinking quickly. "We can't stay here. If they find you, I don't know what they'll do." She breathed unsteadily. "I cannot fight. I cannot run. I'm still weak." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I'll do the running for both of us." He grabbed a heavy toolbox and dragged it toward the hidden trapdoor under his workbench. The workshop was old, built by his grandfather long before he was born, and beneath it was a network of storage tunnels carved from stone. Almost no one in town knew they existed except him. He opened the trapdoor and motioned for her. She tried to stand, but nearly fell. Instantly, he rushed to her side, lifting her gently. She leaned against him, breathing hard. He carefully helped her climb down the wooden ladder into the dim underground passage. Once she was safely below, he climbed down after her and closed the trapdoor above them. The tunnels were cool and silent, lit only by the small lamp he grabbed from the workbench. The air smelled like old dust and metal, but it was safe, hidden, protected. She stood close to him, taking small breaths. He could sense she was frightened, though she tried to hide it. "Will they enter the workshop?" she asked. "Probably," he replied honestly. But they won't find this place. These tunnels are older than the town. She looked around the narrow passage, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Your world. It has secrets, too. Every world has something it hides, he said. They moved deeper into the tunnel. Her steps were slow, unsteady. He stayed by her side, ready to catch her if she slipped. The tunnel curved and split in different directions, one leading toward an old mine, one toward a storage shed outside town, and one that ended in a dead end. He chose the path toward the mine. It was the safest, the farthest, and the place no one ever visited anymore. As they walked, she whispered, "I'm sorry." He stopped, turning toward her. "For what?" "For bringing danger to your home," she said. "Your life was quiet before I fell from the sky." He gave a small, tired smile. "Quiet doesn't mean good. And you didn't choose to crash here. But you chose to help me," she said softly. "And now you pay the price." He shook his head. "You'd do the same." She looked at him with surprise, as if no one had ever told her that before. When they reached the old mine chamber, he helped her sit on a smooth rock. He placed the lamp on the ground. The soft light filled the room, making her features stand out, the tired eyes, the faint glow under her skin, the mixture of fear and determination. They sat quietly for a moment. Then he asked, "Who are they?" "The ones looking for you." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Hunters. Not from my world. They don't care who they hurt. They track anything with value." His jaw tightened. "And you have value to them?" She nodded slowly. "My world's treaty documents. My royal seal. Even my knowledge. Any of it could be used wrongly." She paused. "But mostly, they want power. Anyone rare or important becomes a target." He sat beside her, leaning back against the stone wall. "Well, they're not getting you." "You don't understand," she whispered. "If they find me, they won't just take me. They'll use me to find others. People I care about. People who trusted me. And you think I'll let that happen?" He said, almost offended. She looked at him deeply. "Why do you risk so much for me? You don't know me. You don't know if I can repay you. You don't know if helping me will ruin your life." He thought for a long moment before answering. "I don't need a reason to do what feels right." She lowered her gaze, a small breath escaping her. "You are different." A soft rumble vibrated through the tunnel, then distant footsteps above them. The hunters were inside the workshop now. The mechanic felt his heartbeat quicken, but kept his expression calm so she wouldn't worry. "They won't find us," he assured her again, but she didn't look relieved. Instead, she looked like she was trying to understand something deeper about him. After a while, the footsteps faded. The underground silence returned. "Will they come back?" she asked. "Probably," he admitted. "But next time, we'll be ready." She leaned back weakly. "I need to finish the repairs. The ship must fly again." "I'll bring the parts down here," he said. "We'll work in the tunnels until it's safe." She stared at him, her expression softening. "You should have been born in my world." He raised an eyebrow. "Why's that?" "Because in my world," she said quietly, "people like you are rare. You protect without wanting anything. You help without expecting reward. You care without fear." He rubbed his arm awkwardly. "I'm just doing what anyone with a heart would do." "Not anyone," she whispered again. He didn't respond. He simply stood and checked the tunnel entrance, making sure no one followed. Then he sat back down beside her, closer than before. She didn't move away. The quiet moment between them felt heavy and calm at the same time. Even with danger above them, this little space felt safe, almost comforting. She closed her eyes slowly, exhaustion taking over. "Wake me if danger returns." "I will," he said softly. Her head tilted slightly to the side, resting against the wall. Her breathing steadied, her face relaxed, and the faint glow under her skin dimmed as she drifted into sleep. He watched her for a long time, feeling something grow inside him, something he wasn't ready to name yet. She had brought danger into his life, but she had also brought meaning, Dot, and he wasn't letting anything happen to her. The next morning, the sunlight came softly through the workshop windows, warming the floor and the tables covered with tools. The mechanic woke up earlier than usual, not because he had work to do, but because something inside him felt restless. Maybe it was the memory of the long night they spent fixing the ship. Maybe it was the princess's quiet voice when she thanked him for not giving up. Or maybe it was the way she had smiled at him before going to rest, like someone who finally felt safe after being alone for too long. He walked to the kitchen space, made a simple breakfast, and tried to keep his thoughts calm. But his mind kept returning to the same thing. She was leaving soon. Once her ship was ready, once the power cells finished charging, she would take off and return to her world. He knew that was how things were supposed to be. She had responsibilities, a kingdom waiting, people who depended on her. He was just a mechanic from a small workshop on a quiet planet. They came from two different worlds, literally. But even knowing all that, he still felt something tugging at him. A feeling he didn't want to name yet. He glanced at the ship, shining, restored, and quietly humming with fresh energy. The only thing left was a final systems check. Just then, he heard soft footsteps behind him. The princess walked in, her hair tied loosely, her clothes simple, but still carrying an elegance that didn't need effort. She looked more rested today, more steady, as if she finally had enough strength after days of stress. She greeted him with a gentle tone. He smiled back and offered her a cup of warm drink. She accepted it with both hands, as if she had learned that small gestures on this planet held meaning. For a few moments, they simply stood there, sipping quietly. The silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Dot, she asked if the ship was ready. He nodded and explained the final steps. But as he talked, he noticed something surprising. She didn't look excited. She didn't look relieved. Her eyes kept moving away from the ship and instead kept returning to him, as if her mind was on something else entirely. He didn't question it. Not yet. They went outside to begin the last systems test. He walked around the ship with his scanner, checking the stability of the new power relay. She followed behind him, almost distracted, watching him more than the ship. When the tests were done and everything looked perfect, he stepped back with a small sigh. "Your ship is ready," he said, trying to sound cheerful. She nodded slowly, but there was no joy in her expression. If anything, she seemed even more distant. He waited for her to say something. Maybe she would talk about her journey, or thank him again, or tell him she would visit him someday. But instead, she just stood there, holding her hands together like she was trying to stop them from shaking. Dot, it bothered him. Not because she was leaving, but because she looked troubled. He finally asked if something was wrong. Dot, at first, she didn't answer. She turned away, looking at the sky as if she was trying to find the right words somewhere far above the planet. He waited patiently, knowing she spoke slowly when something mattered deeply to her. After a long silence, she finally admitted that she was scared. He didn't understand at first. She was brave, strong, trained in survival and diplomacy. She faced danger before reaching his planet. What could she possibly fear now? She explained that going back home meant facing a reality she wasn't ready for. Her kingdom expected her to be strong, perfect, unshaken. She had been raised to carry responsibilities she never chose. But after spending time on this quiet world, after meeting someone who helped her without asking for anything in return, she realized how exhausted she truly was. She told him that this small mechanic's workshop felt more like freedom than her palace ever had. Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with honesty. She said she didn't know how to walk away from the first place that ever felt peaceful, or from the first person who treated her like she was more than a title. He listened carefully, trying to stay calm. Her words moved him deeply, but he didn't let it show too strongly. He wanted her to speak without feeling pressured. He told her that her feelings were real and that it was okay to feel uncertain. He reassured her that she wasn't weak. She had survived things most people never even imagined. The fact that she longed for peace didn't make her less. It made her human in a way. She looked at him, surprised by how gentle his voice was. Maybe she expected him to tell her to leave quickly or to behave like a loyal worker who knew his place. But he didn't. He spoke to her like someone who cared about her, not her status, not her responsibilities, but her. She asked him if he would think differently of her if she admitted something more. He promised he wouldn't. She hesitated again, then said she didn't want to go yet. He knew this was a dangerous path. If she stayed too long, she might face punishment back home. If someone from her world discovered she delayed her return because she felt safe with a mechanic, it could cause political issues. But despite all that, a small part inside him hoped she truly meant it. Still, he tried to stay sensible. He told her that she could rest for a little longer, but eventually she would have to return. He didn't want her to face trouble because of him. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. She said she wasn't talking about resting for a few more hours. She meant she didn't want to leave this planet yet, because she didn't want to leave him. He felt his breath catch for a moment. He wasn't expecting her to be that direct. For the first time, her emotions showed clearly. Her eyes softened, her shoulders relaxed, and the fear she carried seemed to melt. She stood close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. He told her that he didn't want her to leave either. They didn't move any closer, didn't do anything dramatic. They just stood there, letting the truth linger in the air, simple, honest, and powerful. A soft breeze passed by, lifting the dust around their feet. The world felt strangely calm around them. She said she didn't know what happened next. He answered that they didn't need to know yet. They just needed to take things slowly and think clearly. She asked him if she could stay for a few more days to see what her heart really wanted. He agreed without hesitation. She smiled, this time a real smile, one that reached her eyes. The rest of the day felt lighter. She helped him around the workshop, asking questions about tools, watching him work with curious focus. He taught her how to tighten a bolt and how to test a battery cell. She wasn't very good at it yet, but she laughed every time she made a small mistake, and he found himself laughing with her. In the evening, they sat outside, watching the stars appear one by one. She told him stories from her world, not political ones, not royal ones, but small moments from her childhood. He shared simple stories from his own life, nothing grand, but every word she listened to like it mattered. As the night grew deeper, neither of them felt the need to rush anything. For now, she wasn't a princess, and he wasn't just a mechanic. They were two people sitting under the same sky, trying to understand emotions they never expected to feel, and even though the future was still uncertain, both of them felt something quietly growing inside them, a connection neither of them planned, but neither wanted to let go. The days that followed felt like a strange mix of urgency and calm. The princess spent her time helping the mechanic organize the alien ship's parts while he worked tirelessly on the final repairs. They were a team now, even if the world above didn't know it. Each morning, she would sit on a stool beside him, carefully handing him components or pointing out small details in the ship's systems. Sometimes she would quietly watch him, as if trying to understand not only how he worked, but who he really was. For the mechanic, every glance from her felt heavier than any physical labor. He had spent most of his life alone, surrounded only by broken machines and dusty tools, never expecting someone to notice him, not really notice him. And yet, Here she was, an alien princess, someone from a world he could never imagine, watching him with trust in her eyes. One afternoon, as he carefully fitted the final energy conduits into the ship, she spoke softly. "When this is done, I will have to leave." He didn't look up from his work. "I know." Her voice quivered just slightly. "I want to stay longer, not just because of this ship, but because of this place. And because of you." The words made him pause. He tried to focus on the wires in his hands, but suddenly, the simple act of holding a tool felt different. Every movement seemed heavier with the knowledge of what she had just said. He didn't know what to say. He had never imagined someone like her could feel something for him. Finally, he managed, "I don't want you to leave either. But you have a world waiting for you. A responsibility you cannot ignore." She nodded, but her expression was conflicted. "I know, and yet, leaving feels like abandoning something important here. You saved me. You helped me when no one else could. You did everything without asking for reward. And now I want to give you something." He set the tools down and looked at her, curious. "What kind of reward?" Her eyes softened, and for a moment she seemed almost shy. "Not a thing. Not money. Not a title. Something else. A promise. A future." He blinked. He didn't expect that. He had thought the reward would be a smile, maybe gratitude, maybe a simple acknowledgement. But she was talking about something deeper, something meaningful. "I don't understand," he said honestly. "You will," she replied quietly. "But I cannot explain it fully here. It is something rare, something I rarely offer anyone outside my world." He studied her face. Her tone was calm but serious. He realized that whatever she was about to offer, it wasn't a small gesture. It was a bond, a connection, something that could change his life forever. The rest of that afternoon, they worked together in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. He fitted panels and wires with precision, and she guided him patiently, giving small corrections when needed. Sometimes their hands brushed as they passed tools. Each time there was a tiny jolt of awareness, like both of them suddenly remembered that they weren't just working on a machine. They were sharing something far more personal. By evening, the ship was almost complete. The glowing conduits hummed steadily, and the navigation system responded to her presence. They tested the engines together, her eyes lighting up as small bursts of energy passed through the circuits. It was almost magical, the machine, responding to human hands and alien touch. Simultaneously, as they stood back to admire their work, she turned to him. "It is ready," she said simply. He smiled, though inside he felt a mix of pride and sadness. Ready for what? He knew the ship was ready to leave, but he wasn't sure if he was ready to let her go. She stepped closer, looking directly at him. "I want to give you the promise now." He frowned. "The promise?" She nodded, her glowing eyes steady. "The promise of a future, a connection that cannot be broken by distance or time. You helped me when no one else would. You risked yourself. You gave your trust without asking for anything. Now I am asking you to trust me in return." He swallowed hard. He had spent his life repairing things, machines, engines, small pieces of metal that held together under pressure. He had never repaired trust, never built a bond like this before. And yet, he felt something shift inside him. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," she said, her voice soft but firm, "that you are expected to be part of my world. Not now, not immediately, but in the future. When the time is right, you will come with me. You will be honored. You will be recognized. And you will never be alone in facing the challenges ahead. I am giving you the hope of something extraordinary." For a moment, he was speechless. The words were simple, but their weight was enormous. He had never expected anything like this, not from anyone, certainly not from someone from another planet, someone he barely knew a week ago. And yet, here she was, offering him a chance to be part of something greater. He looked down, unsure how to respond. "I don't know what to say." "Say you will trust me," she said gently. "Say you will be willing to follow when the time comes. That is enough." He nodded slowly, feeling a warmth spread through him that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just excitement. It was a sense of belonging, of finally being needed in a way that mattered. "I trust you," he said quietly. She smiled, and for the first time in days, the tension around her eased completely. She reached out and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "That is all I need for now. But remember, this is only the beginning. There will be challenges. There will be decisions. But we face them together." The mechanic nodded again. He didn't fully understand everything that lay ahead, but he understood enough. He was part of something larger than himself. And he wasn't alone anymore. That night, they prepared the ship for its final systems check. The energy cores glowed brightly, humming steadily. The navigation panels responded to her presence, and the defensive shields lit up briefly as she activated them. Everything worked perfectly. As they watched the ship from a distance, she turned to him once more. "When I leave, remember this moment. Remember that you made a difference, not just to me, but to my people. You showed that even a small world can change the fate of another. And now, you are part of that story." He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded, feeling a strange mix of pride and fear. The ship was ready to leave, and with it, she would go back to her world, leaving him behind, or so he thought. She paused, looking up at the night sky. The stars were bright and clear, and he realized that each one seemed to carry a message, a possibility, a hope. "Soon," she said softly, "we will meet again. Not here, not now, but when the time is right. You will be expected in ways you cannot yet imagine, and I will be waiting." He swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. The expectation was heavy, but it wasn't frightening. It was a promise, something rare and precious that few people in the universe would ever receive. "Then I'll be ready," he said quietly. She nodded, satisfied, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax completely. They stood together in silence, looking at the ship that now represented not only a machine, but a bond, a connection, and a future neither of them could fully predict. As the night deepened, the glow from the ship's energy cores bathed the workshop in soft, otherworldly light. They both felt the quiet thrill of anticipation. Danger had passed, but something new had begun. And though they did not speak again that night, the understanding between them was clear. They were linked now, not just by circumstance, but by choice. He went to sleep that night with a calm heart, knowing that the princess had given him something no machine, no tool, no reward could ever offer: the promise of a future, the trust of someone extraordinary, and the expectation that his life was about to change forever. She, in turn, rested with the comfort of knowing that she had found a rare soul, someone who would face the unknown with her, not for power, not for reward, but for trust and connection. And though neither of them knew exactly how the future would unfold, both understood one thing: the bond they had formed in the quiet desert workshop was unbreakable. The morning sun rose over the desert, painting the sand in golden hues. The mechanic was awake early, as always, but today the air felt different. It was quieter than usual, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. The princess had slept more soundly than he had ever seen her sleep since she arrived, and now she was sitting quietly on the cot, her glowing eyes observing the workshop. She looked calm, but he could tell her mind was busy. Today was the day she would leave. He kept busy, arranging tools and checking the ship one last time. Every detail mattered. He tightened screws, checked the energy conduits, and made sure the power cores were functioning perfectly. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a symbol of their trust, their teamwork, and the bond that had grown between them over the past days. That the princess watched him in silence. She didn't offer advice or instructions this time. She simply observed, as if taking mental snapshots of every small gesture. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her face was calm, but the subtle tension in her shoulders betrayed her nerves. Finally, she spoke softly. "You've done well. The ship. It is ready." He looked up and nodded. "It's ready. You can leave any time." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no hesitation. "Not yet." He frowned slightly. "Not yet?" She shook her head. "I need to say goodbye properly. Not just to this place, not just to the work we did, but to you." He felt a lump form in his throat. He had expected the goodbye to be difficult, but the weight of her words hit him differently. It wasn't just a farewell. It was recognition, acknowledgement, and connection all in one. They walked outside together. The ship gleamed under the morning sun, its panels smooth, its energy cores humming softly. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel intimidating. Not anymore. Today, it carried not only her, but also a part of their shared experience, a part of trust and understanding that could never be erased. The princess moved closer to him. "I want you to know something," she said, her voice steady but warm. "The promise I made, it is real. You helped me when I needed it most. You risked yourself without expecting anything. That is rare. That is why I chose you to be part of my life. Not as a mechanic, not as someone from this world, but as someone I trust, someone I rely on, and someone I care for." He swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. He had never expected someone from another world, someone so extraordinary, to say something like that to him. All his life, he had been invisible to most people. He had fixed machines, helped people quietly, and gone unnoticed. But now, standing before her, he felt seen in a way he never had before. "I don't know what to say," he admitted honestly. "Then don't say anything," she replied with a soft smile. "Just remember that you made a difference. Not just to me, but to my world. And one day, when the time comes, you will be part of it. You will be expected, but you will never face it alone." He nodded slowly. Her words sank in, warming him from the inside. For a moment, he felt lighter, as if a weight he had carried for years had been lifted. The ship's engines began to hum louder. The time had come. She turned to him, placing a small hand on his arm. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for saving me, for trusting me, for believing." He smiled, feeling a strange mixture of pride, sadness, and hope. "Take care of yourself," he said, "and don't forget what we've shared here." "I won't," she promised. They stood together in silence, watching the energy cores glow brighter, signaling that the ship was ready to leave. The desert wind picked up slightly, carrying sand around their feet, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt like the world itself was marking this moment, acknowledging the significance of it. Finally, she stepped toward the ship. He held his breath, watching every movement. She paused at the entrance and turned back to him one last time. "Remember, you are part of this, part of me, and I will return. When the time is right, I will find you." He nodded again, unsure if he would see her soon, but confident in the promise she had given him. She entered the ship, and he watched as the panels closed around her. The engines roared softly, and a faint glow enveloped the craft. Slowly, steadily, the ship lifted off the ground. It rose higher and higher, catching the sunlight as it soared into the sky. He stood there, silent, as she disappeared into the distance. For a moment, he felt an emptiness, a quiet ache in his chest. But it wasn't sadness alone, it was anticipation. The promise she had given him was real, and he trusted that it would bring them back together. Over the next days, he returned to his workshop, but nothing felt the same. The machines he repaired, the engines he fixed, they were still his work, but now they felt smaller somehow. He had been touched by something extraordinary. He had connected with someone from another world, someone who saw him for who he truly was, not just as a mechanic, not just as a helper. He often found himself looking at the sky, imagining her flying through the stars, her ship gliding smoothly through the atmosphere, her glowing presence illuminating distant worlds. He imagined the challenges she faced, the responsibilities she carried, and he smiled, knowing that she would be strong, but also knowing that she carried a piece of him with her. Weeks passed, and still he received no message, no sign of her return. But he didn't worry. He had learned from her that trust was not about immediate results. It was about believing in someone's word, their intention, and their promise. And he trusted her completely. One evening, he was working late on a rusted engine, cleaning parts and organizing tools, when a soft hum filled the workshop. He froze, recognizing the sound immediately. It was familiar. It was her ship. He ran outside, heart pounding, and saw the ship descending slowly toward the desert. Its glow was brighter than he remembered, and its movements were precise, controlled, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. The ship landed softly, and the entrance opened. She stepped out, radiant and composed, but her eyes immediately sought his. The moment their gazes met, the weight of everything they had shared passed between them silently. She walked toward him, and he couldn't stop the smile that spread across his face. "You came back," he said, his voice filled with relief and disbelief. "I promised," she replied softly. "And I always keep my promises." They stood close, neither speaking for a long moment. The desert around them was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the ship cooling. She reached out and placed a hand on his cheek, a gesture gentle yet profound. "You trusted me," she said, "and now it is my turn to trust you. Will you come with me?" He nodded without hesitation. "I will." The words felt natural, inevitable. The bond they had formed, the promise she had given, the connection they had nurtured, it all led to this moment. She smiled, and together they stepped toward the ship. As the entrance closed behind them, the engines roared to life once again. They rose into the sky, leaving the desert behind, carrying with them not just a princess and a mechanic, but a story of trust, courage, and an extraordinary bond that transcended worlds. As the stars stretched out before them, he realized that his life would never be ordinary again. He would face challenges, adventures, and responsibilities he had never imagined, but he would do it alongside someone who had seen his heart and chosen him for what he truly was. And in that vast universe, filled with danger, wonder, and infinite possibilities, they knew one thing clearly. Together, they could face anything. Together, they had found a future worth risking everything for. The mechanic, once a simple man repairing machines, now stood at the threshold of the unknown. But for the first time in his life, the unknown didn't feel frightening. It felt like home. And so, as the ship vanished into the horizon, carrying them both toward countless stars and adventures yet to come, a new chapter began, not just for a princess or a mechanic, but for two people bound by trust, courage, and the promise of a shared future that neither time nor distance could break. The desert below remained silent, holding their story like a secret treasure, waiting for the day when the world would learn that extraordinary things could happen when ordinary hearts dared to trust one another. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, under the glow of distant suns, their story continued, forever intertwined, forever unexpected, and forever remarkable.